The wind in Bitterroot Valley never just blew. It grieved and it carried the ghost of my wife's laughter right through the hollow I called a heart. October 1888, and Montana was dying. The grass was brittle under a horse's hoof. The creek had receded to cracked ribbons of mud, and the sky was a vast, cruel blue with no promise of rain. My ranch, 40 square miles of land that Maria and I had poured our sweat and hopes into, now felt like a tombstone. It had been 2 years since the fever took her breath, and my world had shrunk to dust, cattle, and a gnawing loneliness. Pain has a way of making itself physical. For me, it was a piece of rusted metal. A snapped strand of barbed wire had torn my palm open last week, and I, in my dumb pride, had let it fester. Now red rivers of poison ran up my arm, and a hot fever blurred the edges of the world. That's why when I saw her at the gate, I thought I was delirious. Lena Nakoma. She lived at the edge of town, in a small cabin that sat in a no-man's land. Not quite white and not quite of her mother's people. In Redemption Gap, that made her worse than both. She stood there, still as a doe, holding a clutch of leaves and wildflowers. There was an unnerving stillness to her, a way her dark eyes took in everything without judgment. At 29, she carried the weariness of someone much older. "Your hand," she said, her voice low and soft as rustling leaves. "It needs to be seen to." The fever and the pain had made me mean. All the venomous whispers of the town, all the prejudice I'd breathed in with the Montana dust came spilling out of me. "I don't need help from your kind," the words hung in the heavy air between us. She didn't flinch, just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She turned and melted back into the sagebrush as if she'd never been there at all. Jedediah Stone, my foreman since I was a boy, stood on the porch, disappointment etched deep into his leathery face. He said nothing, but I felt his judgment heavier than the sun's heat. 2 days later, my world was sweat and tremors. The poison river in my arm had become a raging fire. Pride is a luxury a dying man can't afford. I stumbled from the house, saddled my mare, and rode for the edge of town. Every beat of my heart a hammer blow against the wound. Her cabin was neat, with bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, smelling of earth and pine. She let me in without a word of accusation, her eyes simply acknowledging my defeat. She tended the wound with skilled fingers, cutting away the dead flesh and applying a cool dark green poultice. Our silence was heavier than any accusation, and as her fingers brushed my skin, I felt a tenderness I'd forgotten existed. It was then that I saw it, a faint silvery scar in the shape of a crescent moon on the inside of her wrist, an unspoken story I didn't have the right to ask. A week later, the fever was gone, leaving only a dull ache and a persistent sense of shame. I went to Redemption Gap for supplies and saw Lena in Miller's general store. Miller was pretending to be busy, wiping down an already clean counter, his back to her. The other women in the store clustered together, their whispers as sharp as broken glass. Isolation was a weapon, and they wielded it expertly. A cold anger, a feeling I thought had died with Maria, rose in me. I stepped to the counter, slapping my list down with a thud. "Miller," I said, my voice even. "Miss Nakoma is waiting," Miller started, his face flushing. Before he could answer, an oily voice cut through the air. "Well now, Thorne. Didn't take you for a man with a taste for the wild. Silas Blackwood." He owned the next valley over, a man with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that never warmed. He looked from me to Lena with a greasy smugness that made me want to break his jaw. "Blackwood," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Keep your damn mouth off my affairs." He just chuckled, a sound like rubbing stones together, and backed away, holding his hands up in mock surrender. I bought my supplies and Lena's, enduring the glares of the town. Outside under the wooden awning, Lena looked at me. "Thank you," she said, but there was no warmth in it. "Your kindness will only bring you trouble in this place." She was right. 3 days later, I found my north fence cut, the wire snipped clean as if by professional pliers. 20 head of cattle had strayed into the Badlands, a place of broken legs and thirsty deaths. While inspecting the cut wire, I found something in the dust. It wasn't a footprint or a lost button. It was a small feather, intricately carved from pine wood. It wasn't a clue. It was a message. It took Jed and me 2 exhausting days to round up the witless animals, the simmering tension between our ranch and Blackwood's now a declared hostility. I showed Lena the boot prints I'd found near the fence. She recognized them immediately. "Cheap make," she said. "The kind Blackwood's men wear." One evening, while restringing the wire under a burnt orange sunset, we found ourselves talking. I told her about Maria, how she could make a field of sunflowers bloom with just her smile. She told me of her splintered family, of a world that had been taken from her. A fragile connection, forged from shared loss, grew between us in the fading light. The trouble, as she'd predicted, escalated. Jed reported seeing two of Blackwood's men, the notorious Clegg brothers, cornering Lena on the road outside of town. Jed had run them off, but the story planted a seed of ice in my gut. 2 days later, I was riding through Wolf Canyon, a rugged shortcut back to the ranch. The setting sun cast long purple shadows across the rock walls. The feeling of being watched came too late. The first shot echoed in the canyon, the bullet smacking into the rock beside my head, spraying stone chips. I rolled from the saddle, pulling my Colt as I hit the ground. The Clegg brothers. They were behind the boulders, the muzzle flashes from their rifles angry wasps in the growing dark. A hot poker seared across my shoulder. This wasn't a heroic shootout. It was a dirty, desperate scramble for survival. I fired back, aiming for the flashes. A cry of pain, then the heavy thud of a body hitting the earth. Silence. After a long moment, I heard the sound of a horse galloping away, fading into the distance. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. I got to my feet, staggering, my shoulders screaming. The man I'd shot lay still. I had taken a life. The weight of it settled on me, heavier than the pain of the wound. Somehow, I pulled myself back onto my horse and urged him on, not toward my ranch, but toward the small cabin at the edge of the world. I nearly fell into her arms when she opened the door. She pulled me inside into the lamplight. As she cut away my torn shirt to inspect the wound, I expected to see fear or pity in her eyes. I saw neither. Her face was a mask of cold, precise anger. Her eyes burned with an old, familiar fire. "This is how they start," she whispered, her voice sharp as a flint shard. She dabbed a cloth in hot water, her hands steady and sure. "They try to scare you. Then they try to break you." She looked up, her gaze locking with mine, and in their depths I saw a profound, unshakable strength I was only just beginning to understand. "I will not be broken." Her words hung in the quiet of the cabin, sharper and colder than the Montana night wind. "I will not be broken." In that moment, the woman the town called a stray, the woman I had foolishly turned away, vanished. In her place was someone forged in a fire I couldn't imagine. I had seen hardened soldiers break under far less pressure. She was not a victim for me to protect. She was a survivor, and her declaration was both a vow and a warning. I stayed in her cabin for 3 days, my body healing under her care while my mind reeled. We spoke little, but the silence was filled with unspoken things. I watched the way she moved, a graceful efficiency to everything she did, from grinding herbs to mending a shirt. She was an island of order in the chaos Blackwood had unleashed. It was on the second day, while she was out gathering roots, that I saw it. Lying on a small table, among a stack of carefully drawn botanical sketches, was a small, worn leather-bound book. Keats, poems. An object from another world. A world of parlors and schoolrooms that had slammed its doors in her face. I picked it up, felt its weight, and wondered at the woman who found solace in the words of a long-dead English poet, while living a life most men couldn't endure. My curiosity about her was growing into something more dangerous, a deep admiration that felt like a betrayal. Maria had been summer and sunlight. Lena was earth and shadow, a stark beauty carved by hardship. Guilt gnawed at me. By staying here, I was painting a target on her cabin. I had brought my war to her doorstep. "I have to go," I said on the third morning, my shoulder still stiff but movable. She nodded, her eyes unreadable. "You can't stop what's coming, Elias." "I can keep it away from you," I answered, and we both knew it was a lie. Returning to the ranch was like returning to a fort under siege. Jed didn't ask where I'd been. He simply handed me a hot cup of coffee and said, "Cattle are restless." His silence spoke volumes. He saw the change in me, and his quiet approval felt heavier than the judgment of the entire town. The next blow came not with a gun, but with silence. It was Jed who found it. The main well, the lifeblood of the ranch, had been poisoned. A thin, iridescent sheen of oil slicked the surface, and 3 steers lay dead nearby, their bellies bloated. The foul stench of chemicals and death clung to the air. This was an act of pure cruelty, a deeper cut than any broken fence. He wasn't just trying to cost us money anymore. He was trying to thirst us out. Rage rose in me, hot and clean. I went for my rifle, but Jed stood in my way. "And what will you do, Elias? Ride over to his place alone and get yourself shot down? Better that than sit here and wait to die." Then die for something useful, he said flatly. Don't die stupid. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the dark of the ranch house, rifles within reach, listening to the crickets and the whisper of the wind. Just before midnight, the dog started barking frantically. A soft, almost tentative knock at the door made us both jump. It was Lena, her face a white smudge in the moonless night, a cloth bag in her hand. I thought you might need more poultices, she said softly. And I heard wolves. Before I could answer, all hell broke loose. A gunshot ripped through the night, shattering a window pane. Another slammed into the doorframe, sending splinters flying. We pulled Lena inside as a hail of bullets tore into the house. This wasn't a raid. It was an all-out assault. What followed was a blur of gunfire, splintering wood, and angry shouts in the dark. Jed and I fired back from the windows, the muzzle flashes of our rifles the only light. I expected Lena to hide, to be terrified. She wasn't. In the flickering light of a knocked-over kerosene lamp, I saw her kneeling on the floor, not in terror, but in intense focus. With quick, efficient movements, she was reloading a spare rifle. Her face was frighteningly calm, her hands steady as she slotted each cartridge into place. She pushed the loaded rifle into my hands. "West side," she said, her voice clear and sharp amid the chaos. "There's a man near the barn. We held them off." After 10 frantic minutes, the shooting stopped. We heard the thunder of retreating horses. Silence crashed down, heavy with the smell of gunpowder and plaster dust. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated, riddled with holes. In the quiet aftermath, the adrenaline drained away, leaving a tremor in its wake. I looked at Lena, still kneeling, checking a pistol. A fierce, unnameable emotion surged in me. It wasn't passion. It was awe. I crossed the room and pulled her to her feet, wrapping my arms around her. An act not of desire, but of survival and profound gratitude. I felt her stiffen for a second, then melt against me. Jed stood in the doorway, his rifle still smoking faintly. "That wasn't just to scare us, Elias," he said, his voice a low rasp. "They were trying to burn us out. Blackwood ain't trying to buy you out anymore." He paused, and his next words froze the blood in my veins. "He's trying to erase you." The truth of those words settled over us. This was no longer a land dispute. This was a war of annihilation. The next day, as we were boarding up the broken windows, the sky turned a leaden gray. The air grew unnaturally still, heavy with the promise of snow. We had one other well, 3 miles from the ranch house, a slim thread of hope. If it was poisoned too, we were finished. "I'm going with you," Lena said. It wasn't a request. We rode in silence, the tension of the night before still clinging to us. The first snowflakes began to fall, not gentle flakes, but heavy, wet pellets of ice. Within minutes, a howling wind kicked up and the world vanished in a white vortex. A Montana blizzard wasn't an inconvenience. It was a killer. We were lost, blind, the cold already beginning to gnaw at our bones. Just when I thought we would freeze in our saddles, I saw it. A dark shape, looming out of the curtain of snow. An old line shack, tilted and nearly collapsed, but it was 4 walls and a roof. We urged our horses toward it, shoving open the frozen door and stumbling into the frigid darkness inside. The wind howled outside like a hungry wolf, and we were trapped, the 2 of us, imprisoned by the storm's fury, our body heat the only defense against the invading cold.